This morning, Trey was announced as the winner of the Sekou Smith Award, which he's recognized by local media for his professionalism. I was curious what you've seen since you got here over the last couple of years, his growth, not necessarily as a player, but just as a human being.
Yeah, I think, sometimes we forget, I think Trey in particular, because he was thrust into such a primary role at a young age. And so, his growth has taken place on a lot of different levels, and this is one of them. So it's something that I feel a lot of pride in on his behalf. Like, I guess it's I'm glad to see that recognized, because it's representative of, first, I think, a raised awareness on his part that this is something that is another way that you can impact a team and an organization. And then as that awareness gets raised, you start to envision those situations where that can occur. You become conscious of them, and then you apply yourself in those areas. It's a heck of a award, and I'm glad that he's recognized in that way. It's something he should be very proud of, and we should all appreciate on his behalf.
Quin, independent of the lineup that you have out this afternoon, you're going to see this team again in a few days on Tuesday. Is there anything in particular that you're looking for today that you will want to carry over to the game on Tuesday?
This game, it's been interesting, Brian, because over the course of the last week, this game could have taken on a lot of different shapes. Had we won in Orlando, or either one of us dropped a game or missed the game, whatever the case may be, and where it's landed is what you just described, that teams are preparing for Tuesday, and whatever that looks like, whether it means someone that's banged up, having matchups occur, what teams are going to try to do tactically as far as adjustments. So there's always things that you're thinking about that you might want to see or try. It's a little more difficult to do that when the kind of primary personnel isn't playing. And I don't think all of that has been released yet. I believe we released some of ours. I don't know if Orlando has. I don't think anybody's trying to trick anybody in that regard. So some of it has to do with what you do, and some of it has to do with what they do. I think there's guys that have opportunities in these games to execute, on a fundamental level, adjustments aside. We know who they are, they know who we are. And you want to see whoever's on the floor go out and play a certain way. You may see different coverages, all those types of things that are more game plan specific. But I don't think for us, it's something that you think about, but you probably need to not overthink it on a certain level. And frankly, the game will reveal itself. There's only so much kind of, you can prepare for different pathways, and then when the game starts, you make decisions on what's appropriate.
Just on that, Coach.
We're not going to 1-2-2 full court press. Bring Rick Pitino back.
It's about 5 years now that the playing tournament format has been used.
How many years has it been?
I think it was 2020. I think it was down in Orlando. Yeah.
Yeah.
Under the old system,
Orlando's a little bit of a blur for
yeah.
all.
Under the old system, you would have already qualified for the playoffs being 8th. Now you have to do that extra step. What are your thoughts on this playoff?
The only thing for me that I bristle at sometimes is the idea that you're not a playoff team. When you, like in the previous format, we would have made the playoffs right now. And that to me is relevant on some level, because to whatever extent, whatever happens from here out, singular games, as we all know, we just went through an NCAA tournament. Singular games are different, and to the extent that a team has a season, and I think this pertains precisely to us. The team that we finished last season with I think 6 of our top 7 minutes played are not with our team right now, or not playing. And from the time we started the season, you know, you can do the same math, so that, you know, someone like Mo Gay, who played in the D League up until, you know, December, someone like Keaton Wallace and Daquan Plowden, who we went to Chicago and won a game that, you know, my guess is we weren't supposed to win in a lot of people's eyes. And that's a really significant game. And to the extent that game is reflected in our overall record and the fact that we are 8th, that gets lost a little bit, you know, and so that to me, and I don't think there's an answer to that other than I think for you guys, frankly, to understand that and to recognize, you know, for our specific team, you know, we're starting right now 3 players that didn't play a minute for us last year, that are the average age of, I think, like less than 21 years old. I think that matters, you know, and it matters that group finished 8th and not 10th. I think we were predicted 10th at the beginning of the year. You know, I think we were predicted to win some mid-30s, 34, 35 games. This team's accomplished under some really, you know, challenging circumstances to get to where we are. So in a typical year, we'd say Hawks made the playoffs. That's what a heck of an accomplishment. You know, they weren't supposed to make the playoffs. In this format, depending on what happens, someone turns an ankle, someone has a bad shooting night, somehow that gets diminished because suddenly you're not a playoff team. And then we end the season with this idea that we didn't make the playoffs, and there's a sense of, you know, less achievement than I think is actually the reality of what's happened, because we all have a recency bias. And that takes away, I think, from some of the things. You know, Jalen Johnson was being talked about early in the year as an all-star, you know, and he's been out, you know, and he'll be back. But we've played a season without Jalen. And again, I think it takes away a little bit from some of the contributions that players have made that we didn't necessarily. We kind of taken Dyson for granted right now. That we, you know, but Dyson wasn't doing last year what he did this year. That's pretty impressive. You know, when we started out the season, you know, there was a lot of question marks, and you guys know it because we talked about it like every one of these sessions before and after the game. What Zachary Shea has done is pretty significant. And those guys are being recognized for that individually, but collectively, you know, there's been a lot of other players that have contributed to their development. I think for my coaching staff, you know, what these guys have done to progress, and I think that's reflected in our record. And then all of a sudden, there's a saying. I hope, you know, we win in Orlando and finish 7th, you know, and you know that's better than 8th. And maybe we say, was the season more successful? So we all know that in the end, you know, you'd probably rather finish 10th and win the NBA championship, and that'd be a more successful season, right? So there is that possibility, which I think is baked in. So I really think this is a good thing. The in-season, not the in-season tournament, but you know, the postseason play-in. But I think there's things that it allows us. It shifts our focus a little bit, and I think we can do both. You know, I think we're capable of recognizing, you know, a team's progress and achievement and what they've done during a regular season, especially this group. You know, when you look at the changes in the lineups, and, you know, Onyeka, for example, you know, who hasn't started his entire career, and all of a sudden is thrust in there, and you've seen, you know, some of the things that he's done to help us win. Big part of where we are right now, his development. So I like to point to the development of our group under what I think has been some situations that we faced a lot of adversity, and they've powered through that. It's a credit to them.
Coach, you talked about the average age of like the players on the team. How big is it, I guess, when you can go into a playing game and possibly the playoffs when you have a young guy like Zach and Dyson, you know, getting that experience early in their career?
Yeah.
In the future.
No, yeah. Sometimes I refer to the ages of our guys because I think, you know, when you look across the league and see the teams that we're kind of similarly situated with from a record standpoint right now, like the profile of our players is very different. So to have that opportunity, as you mentioned, with some younger guys, you know, is important. You know, like, but we also get into, it's not just about their development, it's about winning. And oftentimes what happens in an NBA season, you have kind of conflicting incentives at times. You know, is it, you know, you're placing priorities on different things at different times. There may be transactions that, you know, appear to be on the front end that are more future focused, and how does the team deal with that? So this is a good example. You know, like, we're not going to start Dyson at the point instead of Trey this year for his development as a point guard potentially. You know, he did that when he was in high school. But Dyson's been pretty good in this situation. But that said, the experience that Dyson gets, you know, playing in a game like this with this group, and I think it's more than just individual guys. I think it's a collective experience for all those guys to go through something like this together. It's not just about Zach or Dyson or O or Mo. It's about those guys collectively as a team, because that's how you win in this league. You know, the teams win.
Thanks, Coach.
Okay.